protest. To be real and to be honest, there are a fraction of people out there who do not trust the police. So we have to own that. But there are also more fractions of folks who, if I walked you out today, I could walk you to a table where we've literally, since the beginning of COVID, now that I think about it, have been putting cards, letters, food, thank yous, banners, emails, notes, blue ribbons outside to show its support of law enforcement. So it's really trying to balance all that while at the same time making sure that my employees know that we are accountable, that we are responsible, but I still value what they do every day, especially, in the last few days it's been hot outside. And I've said this to you before, I'll keep saying it, I marvel at the fact that folks still come to work and put this uniform on. I marvel at the fact that the millions of calls for service that we take end well. I'm always concerned when we don't do things the way that we're supposed to, but instead of hiding from it, instead of running from it, we learn from it, and we make the adjustments that we need to make.
You've worn a uniform for many years.
30.
Has there ever been a tougher time to wear a uniform?
Good question. So I'm certain if you talk to folks in the Rodney King era, I think they would say it was a very tough time. I think if you talk to people back in the civil rights era, I think they would say it's a very tough time. I will tell you, with technology the way it is, with the ability of people to change on a pivot, with the ability of folks not to at times want to work with law enforcement, it's very challenging because we pride ourselves on being that agency and that organization that stays connected. So how do you communicate with people who don't want to communicate with you? While at the same time, I still have a responsibility. My men and women who are uniformed still have a responsibility, and we still are supposed to make sure that they're safe. I need to make sure you're safe. I can't have you out in the middle of the road. I can't have you conducting criminal behavior. So we're really trying to tread through that, and it's extremely challenging.
It's got to be a minefield because unlike the Rodney King era,
sure.
Unlike the 60s with the civil rights movement, now you have social media and you have everyone with
Yes.
a camera on their phone
Yes.
able to take that information and in
Upload
some
it
cases
yes.
manipulate it.
So people can manipulate, they can show information before we know the rest of the story. They can show the beginning, but not the middle, but the end. It's very challenging, and that's why I love working with my team that I work with in the Public Affairs Bureau, so I do need to give a shout out to the Public Affairs Bureau. They've really stepped up to the game to make sure that we're able to push out information as fast as we can, while at the same time, when we talk about me wearing a uniform for 30 years, you still have to maintain the integrity of an investigation. And that's a delicate balancing act right now.
How did we get to this point, though? Because it seems like we have not seen this kind of racial unrest and the feeling that something profound is about to happen and has to change. How did we get here?
So I will quote a young individual that I had a conversation with in the early stages of the protests. And the quote went something like this, I'm paraphrasing. So in the 60s, we sat down, we marched. Still nothing's changed. Rodney King happens. Still nothing has changed. The litany of social media posts and messaging and officers doing things unfathomable when it comes to the George Floyd incident, they're tired. They're tired, they're frustrated, they don't want to talk about it anymore. Chief, show me actions. And so our actions have been, I think, swift. We banned the chokehold, so that was one of the first things that I did in June. We've adjusted our policies, procedures, and practices when it comes to duty to intervene, when it comes to duty to render aid, when it comes to duty to report. We've made adjustments to our policy on making it an absolute last resort for you to have to shoot at a moving vehicle. We've upped our game on mental health training for our employees, but I'm also not naive to think, let me just tell you all the wonderful stuff, right? We have work to do. So we have a use of force data reporting issue that my folks are literally cramming day and night to try to make sure that we're able to push out information. It's not because I don't want to, it's because I can't push out the information and have it all make sense because systems are not talking to one another. So we are in this interesting time where there's almost no patience or no grace to give us time to get caught up because folks out there sometimes think that there's something nefarious going on. So I'm not naive to think that there's not much we can do because we do have a lot of work to do.
Am I overstating it, though, to say that we have reached critical mass in this country when it comes to race relations in the police?
You know, critical mass, I think we're definitely at a critical juncture where police executives like myself, others across the country, have really got to listen to what's being said and really make meaningful reforms that are tangible. You know, don't give me this coffee with a cop, you know, let me have ice cream with you thing. Show me something tangible. What does your policy say? What does your training say? What are you saying? I think if that's critical, I think we're absolutely there.
In a lot of ways, what I think police across the country are going through is very similar to what we in the media are going through, and that is the concept of fake news. When you have this confluence of social media and cable talking heads and then local media, and someone calls a report, and there are false reports or manipulated media or whatever, they lump us all in the same boat. When you have a bad cop and there's a bad shooting in Wisconsin, then you all take the brunt of it.
Right. So I would absolutely agree, and I've actually said that out loud. And it's interesting that you bring it full circle with the media. So we used to say there is no other profession that gets painted with this broad brush other than law enforcement. I would have to echo what you're saying, that the media is the absolute same, but I also don't want to leave the cliffhanger. So when we've had officers who have not behaved, have not followed policy, procedure, and practice, we've dealt with them. When it came to our attention, we deal with those issues. And quite frankly, we always learn from those issues too, even if it's very painful to go through those experiences.
But it's not the kind of a situation where if something bad happens in Wisconsin, it doesn't affect you here in Phoenix.
Oh, it absolutely affects us now, because now it's pasted and posted on social media. And back to your point, with people giving their individual accounts of what's happening. So I'm always thinking and processing whatever's going to happen in the country could have an adverse impact here in the city of Phoenix. So I think you all noticed when you walk through the building, we still have the pin fencing around our building. Not necessarily because of things that are going on here at this time, at this moment, but we know at any given time, something could pop off in Wisconsin or in somewhere else, and then we have folks who are going to take advantage of that and do the things that we've asked them not to do repeatedly in social media and in our guidelines for protesting.
You guys haven't been able to avoid some of the fray here.
No.
Drayvon Ames?
No.
You have a situation where the city of Phoenix is ready to pay out $500,000. In that situation, a shoplifting where a gun was drawn. How do you move forward from something like that, where you have an officer draw a gun on a suspected shoplifter, and work on regaining the trust in a situation like that, which was widely broadcast?
So widely broadcast for the world to see. Many, many meetings over that. So instead of hiding behind what happened, we faced it up front once we realized and it was brought to our attention. If you are aware, one of the duties that I have is to really make sure that I'm holding my employees accountable. Not easy, not something that people want to brag about, but that employee that was involved in that incident is no longer a Phoenix police officer. So you follow that up with speaking to your employees, because there's definitely morale issues ebbing and flowing in law enforcement right now. But you also follow it up with training. You follow it up with ENS messages. You follow it up with legal briefs. You just don't stand there and say, oh my goodness, this has happened, and just stop. We keep moving forward because we don't have anything else to do but to do that, because that's in the Phoenix PD DNA.
When you hear the term cultural systemic racism, does that get you angry, or do you quietly nod your head and go, yeah, maybe there is some of that? Not here, but on a national basis in some police departments.
Right. So
because that's a tough thing to change.
So you always have to pause, because it's said over and over and incessantly and incessantly. As you know, I grew up in Maryville. As you know, I have 2 African-American males who braved to adulthood and are now productive members of society. So I've always had to own that dynamic as people's perceptions of what they think, perceive, and believe, while at the same time, I believe that the Phoenix Police Department is an amazing organization. We've had employees, we've had incidents that have been those incidents that just make you cringe, but you can't freeze. I can't freeze. I have to do something about it. And so when I hear those terms, I do have to own the fact that it's there and work to mitigate it as a police executive.
And I would think that would be one of the hardest things on a national basis to change.
So it is hard to change, but it's not impossible. And it's possible because police executives like myself, mayors, council people, people in police reform, state legislatures, really do want to make a change. So why I think that this is critical is that people are actually listening. We're listening. We're making changes. We're talking to our command teams. We're talking to members of our community, and really just being very open about the fact that this is uncomfortable. These conversations are uncomfortable. This is not going to be anything that's going to be nice and easy, but we're settled in to making sure that we stay the course. We're settled in to make sure we stay forward focused and to learn.
Chief, I want to take you back to the night of August 9th, protest right outside these walls. Probably one of the reasons you have the barriers up.
One of many.
Bruce Franks has filed a notice of claim saying that he was targeted because he was the leader of the protest. How do you respond to something like that?
So you respond to it by allowing the judicial process to weigh itself out. You respond to it by reassuring your community members of the community messages that we have about protests that pretty much spell out and lay out what the law says, while at the same time, and that's why America is so amazing, at the same time we still have to balance First Amendment. So it is our responsibility to keep you safe if you decide to protest either peacefully or not peacefully, period. It's our job to do that. I believe the Phoenix Police Department has been doing that. I believe we can continue to do that. But I'm also, not, I do believe that we can do things better. We can always learn. We can always adjust. I can say this. My folks have been on that line for a very long time, and they've been professional. They've been courteous. They've been upbeat. In the early stages of the protest, it was really hot outside. So Phoenix Fire stepped up to give my guys intravenous fluids so that they could stay up on the line. And that, again, I think is a testament to the leadership that I have here in the organization.
Can that be a tactic, though, to quell a protest that has turned violent, to grab the leaders of that protest?
So what we did is we are addressing criminal behavior. So we're not addressing the political leaders. We're not addressing things. So we have people who have documented criminal behavior that we're dealing with because we want to keep the community safe, because we want to keep the officers safe, because we want to keep the protesters safe.
All right. Where is the line from where you sit in an adrenaline fill? And I don't have any preconceived notion on what your answer would be here. Okay. So I'm just asking this. Where is the line if you're a cop in an adrenaline-filled situation between doing your job and not creating the appearance of an excessive use of force?
So that is definitely demonstrated to a great degree when I watch my folks on the line, when I watch my folks who are in plain clothes, wearing the mask, walking along with the protesters and with the demonstrators. In spite of the constant barrage, in spite of the heat, in spite of the things that are said, my folks still maintain professionalism. And what I think it is now, it's a check and balance system. So if Jeri Williams and Mercedes Fortune are on the line, and Mercedes and I have been working together for 6 weeks or so, she can tell and she can read if something is wrong with Jeri just based on voice, based on body language, and we added the duty to intervene piece into policy. It's past the policy process that we both have a responsibility to make sure that that doesn't happen. We didn't have that before. So we've made those kind of adjustments and those kind of changes, and that again too reminds us to constantly message, constantly train, constantly remind our folks that, and you mentioned it earlier with the whole cell phone piece, the world is watching. The world is watching Phoenix PD, so let's show them what we're made of.
And the world was watching in Wisconsin.
Yeah, for sure.
When a guy brings a gun to these protests.
Yes.
How much, as someone who wears a uniform and at one time was on the streets, do you worry about a situation like that?
Yes.
Because it is a constitutional right to carry.
It is.
What do you do?
So what we saw in one of the protests, I want to say a week ago, 2 weeks ago, or demonstrations is what I'll call it, is an individual walking, as you're saying, carrying a gun through the crowd, And he was actually talked to by people who attended the demonstration to say, you know what, this isn't that kind of demonstration. So if you want to wear that, we need you to go over here. So it's almost like we see people self-policing to some degree. But any officer in uniform who sees that, you do have to give pause, because there's one thing to allow you your amendment rights. It's another thing to be able to take swift and quick action to keep people safe. And that again is a delicate balancing act for my guys and gals.
I understand. Another right that people have is free speech.
It is.
And when I say that, I think about the pending issue of the Black Lives Mural, which may be going up not far from here. City Council is weighing it. There are some who say it's a great gesture and maybe it would improve relations between Phoenix police and the community at large when they protest. Others within the Black Lives movement say it's an empty gesture. What do you think?
So I think the policymakers will need to make a decision on whether or not they would want to have that there. It's going to be our job to make sure people stay safe.
Defunding the police has become a political hot potato.
Right.
How would something like that in the real world affect you? What would that look like?
So first, we would have to define what defund means. So
And
if you
I have no idea.
Exactly. If you talk to 50 people are going to give you 50 different definitions of that. I think I would answer that question this way. There are some calls that a blue suit and a blue uniform should not respond to, that over time, because of either staffing or people calling at 3 o'clock in the morning or necessity, social services have not been able to respond. We need to get back to those types of models. So we've been very successful in the last 6 or 7 months or so at offboarding about 400 calls a month into mental health services, so a Phoenix police officer never has to show up. Wouldn't that be amazing to extend that to homeless issues that don't involve criminality? Any kind of mental health psychosis dynamic where you send a team of individuals that don't include law enforcement. So when I think of defunding, I think of giving funds to services that can help and impact the community, that gives us, police officers, the chance and opportunity to address criminal behavior, because that's what we're supposed to do.
Would you be a better department if you had more funding for social services and for mental health services?
I'd answer it this way. We'd be a better organization. We'd be a better city. We'd be a better America if we had that.
Yeah. This has got to be, we talked about a tough time to be a cop, but a tough time to be a police chief, much less a police chief of color.
Much less. You want to go the
A
other
woman.
route? There you go.
Okay, did I hit all three?
Yeah, I think you hit all three. Thank you.
Have you ever felt conflicted when you see these situations of?
So it's always worth the conversation. And the conversation for me is from a multitude of different lenses. It's a multitude of lenses as a black mom. It's a multitude of lenses as a black woman in the community that I grew up in and love to this day. It's the blue side of me, who I do think people sometimes see me more blue at times than they see me as an African-American woman, because of the fact that we're all in law enforcement, and this can be very off-putting to people. Anytime you see those challenges happening, I literally reach out to chiefs that I know across the country, and we've been having a lot of conversations about the difficulty in being a police chief at this moment and trying to make the right decisions for the right reasons while still keeping 4,000 people, in my respect, coming to work every day, because if that workflow stops, that could be a challenge, while at the same time really hearing what the community is saying. Not just saying, okay, yeah, we got this, move on to the next thing, really doing something about it. So, conflicted, I don't know if I would use that word, but it definitely gives me pause and creates those conversations where I'm crazy hopeful that we can get through this and build a policing system that people will really appreciate, and that PD can thrive, that the community can thrive, and that the world can just come together again.
But when you take off that uniform, you're no longer the police chief, Jeri Williams. You're a strong black woman living in this America that seems to be at odds with itself.
Right.
Does your heart ache at times?
My heart aches on a multitude of different levels. My heart aches when I see a police officer getting killed or maimed in the line of duty. My heart aches when I look on TV and I see an individual in a truck being circled by a crowd of people and then beating, and he had nothing to do with it. My heart aches when I see 3 police officers in the George Floyd incident not doing anything to address that. So my heart aches often, but the aches have to turn into something productive. It just has to.
I'm wondering, I had a good friend who used to work at 12 as a photographer, became a cop in Mesa.
Oh, wow.
And we followed up with him a year after he became a cop, and I said, what's the biggest change? He said, when I was a photographer and I kissed my wife goodbye when I left for work, I knew I was coming home. When I'm a cop, I now have to have a pause in that statement. My job is to come home to my family at the end of the day. Never let it be said that anyone who wears this uniform doesn't have a tough job.
For sure.
So now they're tasked with not only doing their job and coming home to their family at night, but also not creating a bad image for the uniform they wear.
So it is a tough time to be that first responder out there, because I am certain, because I've talked to them, in their minds they don't want to be the person on social media who's creating the dynamic for their peers on the street. I don't want to be that person, boss. So then what that does is that causes all of us to pause and to make the attempt to rethink how we're engaging and how we're interacting and how we're reacting to people at any given time.
It's got to be tough because you want to give them the tools to do their job effectively, to come home to their family at night, but also to run through this minefield that now exists.
Right, and to really have that mindset, wouldn't it be amazing if at the end of the day or the end of the year or end of whatever this is, that all folks can come home safely? So that is going to have to create that pivot in how we engage with one another, moving more from a kind of warrior mentality to a more guardian mentality. And I know my folks are making that direction through training, through training videos, through us messaging constantly. But I would love to have a world where we all come home okay.
2020 election. Do you worry about protests breaking out here?
So we're concerned about that from all different levels. As I mentioned previously, we're constantly watching what's going on in other parts of the country. So we're able and we're prepared. We're going to do some more messaging when it comes to protesting and during the election cycle or demonstrating in the election cycle, just to make sure we have very clear rules of engagement. But at the same time, we have a responsibility. Keep people safe, make sure that the property doesn't get damaged. So we're going to do our hardest work to make sure we get that messaging out.
Do you take any solace in the old message, walk softly but carry a big stick?
No, I don't, because I think the expectation now is for us to walk and stand with justice and to only use what is necessary in order to control a situation.
Great job, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have to do the weird thing where I look at the TV?
Nope, we have a camera here.
Okay. Do I have to do this weird thing with you over there? I am so happy to hear you taking the measures you took with your dad. Get in, take a shower, do your thing, and then I'll come over and I'll wear a mask. As uncomfortable and awful as they are.
You got to do what you got to do.
And then I guess my question to media folks, and maybe you have a crystal ball. So will we ever get away with it? Get away from this?
Well, I don't know, but I can tell you this: they're